If you can't see, try to move like on this side. I think there's a little less glare, or you know, feel free. Right in the front is not a bad spot either. So really, what this is Dave and I, Dave Timmer and I went to General Synod this year, which was held at Central College. We were called elder delegates. No, because we have been elders in the past at Second. And usually, you know, every churches take turns sending elders, and in a classis of maybe 25 or 30 churches, you know, once in a blue moon you get to go, because it's your church's turn, but the church is a bit in flux right now, and anyway, so this year, I don't even know if it was our turn or how that worked, but we got, this was before Mike and Elizabeth were here, so Steve just asked, or that's how it went with me. Steve asked me if I wanted to go, and Dave and I have on and off gone to Synod, so we went to General Synod, and I thought, you know, when I've been in the church a long time, and as a lay person in the pews, I really never knew much about what happened at Synod. I have been there a couple times. Well, here, let me go forward a little bit. But I never really knew what happened, and I didn't know if any of you felt like me, but I thought it would be kind of nice to have a little explanation, maybe description of what happened. So that's the reason for the presentation. Now, let's see if this will advance. Come on. There we go. Okay, so Dave Timmer, Lori Witt, and I just mentioned my introduction part about how we were asked to go, and so we were delegates. That meant we could vote. If you don't know me, I teach history at the college. I've been in the Reformed Church since I was an infant, so I never really left. For a while, I played the organ at a Presbyterian church in suburban Chicago, but I've really been in the Reformed Church all my life. And Dave, you want to say any words about yourself?
I'm Dave Timmer.
Okay,
I'm Dave Timmer. Wow, I have an echo. I am a retired professor from Central College, retired 3 years ago. I've been a member of the Reformed Church as long as I've been a member of Second Reformed Church, which is since 1980. I have had some experience at General Synod, particularly as a corresponding delegate for the Commission on Theology, but only more recently as an elder delegate and a voting delegate.
Okay, good, thanks. So, just so you have a picture of what it looks like, at Central College, we met in June. We met in the Kuiper Field House, and there were, I don't know how many tables, maybe 60. Maybe we went up to 60, I'm not sure, maybe more. You might know this is the back of Ross Davidson, who's the pastor at Heartland. So you can, this is really the back of the room. I actually found my table. My table was right here, so there's me. You can't see that for you folks, but I was table 51. Dave had to behave.
Right. They put me right in front of the dais. And, the president had his eye on me the whole time.
Yeah. So there, and then up in front are the president, the vice president, and the general secretary. This is my table. There were four of us at each table. This fellow was from Western New York. His name was Rob Knapp. Pastor Ron from Southern California. Thomas Song from Queens, New York. He had a pretty small historically Chinese congregation, and then me. And one thing I really like about going to Synod is that you see the people from the church who come from all over. So that's kind of fun. And I don't have a picture of Dave's table, but you had I'm hoping a good table.
Yeah. Well, there were only 3 of us, and two of us were from Pella, actually.
Oh.
La Costa Van Dyke from Heartland
Heartland.
Reformed Church. Some of you probably know her. And then the other delegate was from an elder delegate from Class of Schenectady, I think, from New York.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a chance to connect with people from that geographically speaking you wouldn't always run into, and get a sense of what the Reformed Church looks like in a different setting. Yeah.
And periodically they had us do table conversations so we get to know each other, and that was fun, sometimes awkward, but sometimes fun. My table, the Pastor Ron from California, was kind of a crazy guy, and we were table 51, so he labeled us Area 51. I thought, that doesn't bode well, thinking about...
A radioactive table.
Yes, the radioactive table. And that was on our thing the whole time. There's me we also had, people sometimes have snacks at their table. My brother is president of Words of Hope, and he wasn't there. He couldn't be there. Well, he was not there. So he said, Words of Hope is famous for having M&Ms at General Synod. Can you have the M&M table? What? Yes, there were peanuts and plain. So that I didn't pass them out as much as he does, I think. But I mean, they were always open, and people had to find us. But anyway, so that's what that is. This is the president of General Synod. The president is a rotating position. For this past year, it was Pastor Dwayne Jackson, who is a co-pastor at Second Reformed in Hackensack, New Jersey. He rings a bell to call the meeting to order. We can maybe talk a little bit more about what the president does. He's actually not the most powerful. Well, I can't talk like that. Right? The most powerful person in the denomination, but I don't actually know everything the president does, except does a lot of visiting of congregations and runs General Synod mission. Dave might know a little more.
Yeah,
about
well, the president is the chair, right?
Chair.
Of General Synod. So he, in most cases, is going to be running the business meeting, so to speak, and that involves a lot of things, as any chair would. Sometimes you have to make decisions about points of order and things like that, and that proved to be important at this General Synod as well.
Yep. He's been active in Reformed Church circles for a long time. I remember him from leading previous small groups at other synods, and it was kind of fun. I didn't know he was our president, so it was fun to see him in that role. This is the General Secretary of the Reformed Church, Eddie Alaman, and he gives an address as well. The General Secretary is the guy who, the person who presides over the General Synod Council, which is kind of like the power. This is arguable, but sort of. They put together General Synod.
Yeah, the General Secretary is a continuing position, unlike the President, who's only has a one-year term. The General Secretary is a continuing and salaried position, and so he's kind of in charge of the continuing operations of the denomination. So one of the interesting issues in Reformed Church polity, that is to say, in how the Reformed Church operates and is governed, is what exactly is the relationship between the General Secretary on the one hand and the General Synod and the President of General Synod on the other hand. So we won't go too deeply into that. If you're a polity nerd, that's fascinating. If most other people, their eyes kind of glaze over.
Yeah. Churches mostly think they have the power. So highlights, a few highlights. My table, I love my table, is that right? I'll go fast through this because we want to get to other things that are happening, but the guy here, second from the left in the middle, Ron from California, he liked to doodle and draw, and he'd been in the RCA a long time. And anytime, I'll just give you a character of my table. Anytime someone would say something that he thought was controversial, and this didn't happen very often at the synod, but he would go, oh boy, here we go. We're opening a can of worms, or here's, wow, that person lobbed a grenade. And he'd share with the whole table. And here, another doodle, he drew Pastor Thomas from Queens fishing. So partly I think he just needed to draw, but he also knew, or he'd say, oh, someone needs to tell that guy to be quiet or whatever, but lots of that kind of fun. Do you want to say a few words? One highlight for me was the women's banquet, but I think Dave kind of too.
A lot of the interesting things at Synod don't take place on the floor of Synod.
Right.
During the business meeting, they take place in the evening or over meal tables, where delegates have a chance to relate to each other more informally. And this year, I think one of the most interesting things was a celebration of 50 years of the ordination of women in the RCA as ministers of Word and Sacrament. It was kind of a big deal. There was I think a dessert reception on Sunday night, and then a dinner, a kind of a formal sit-down dinner on Monday night.
Dave is I'm here, but I'm not there. I know that was my table, so I don't know where. I must have been doing something.
You wandered off. Yeah.
Dave is somewhere in there. Dave and Mary.
They put up a whiteboard at the dinner and invited people to write the names of women in leadership positions in the denomination, particularly women who were ordained as ministers of Word and Sacrament, but also other women who may have paved the way for them. And so this is a picture of the whiteboard, and you'll see some familiar names up there.
If you can come closer. Yeah.
Sophie Matinee Vanderwell, Betty Brunsting.
Fran DeYoung is right
Fran
underneath
DeYoung,
there.
yeah.
And then...
and then also Jane Brown and Elizabeth Brown Hardiman, who are kind of familiar to us. So, and some other folks from Pella who have certainly been leaders in their own congregations for a long time.
And I've heard of this banquet in the past, but I think that I always thought it was just for women, and I was really surprised. I mean, I was very surprised that there were lots of men there, and then I thought, why not, right? And even the general secretary, who is, his background is ethnically is Hispanic. I didn't actually know where he stood on women's ordination, because some congregations, some churches, especially some of the like the more of Hispanic or Korean denominations have not always been supportive. But Eddie talked about his two girls, and one of them being interested in the ministry, and I thought, wonderful, So here's a picture that they took at General Synod. People there was a T-shirt that has like a ray gun T-shirt that has all these names of biblical women, and then at the bottom it says, "and me," and a lot of people are wearing their shirts, and Dave and Mary might be in there, but
I couldn't find
I
Dave.
did not get it. I looked for it. It was like looking at Where's Waldo, right? But I couldn't find Dave. One other thing I wanted to mention is worship. This is in Douwstra. I think that is you, Dave, right there in the corner. Maybe not. Thought that was your shirt. But opening worship and closing worship were in Douwstra. And then every morning there was worship to begin the day. And that was very nice. We got to hear a lot of different voices, sing a lot of different music. Some very talented people. And so that was very nice. I guess I had that written up here. All the preachers of worship were from the racial and ethnic councils this year. And so there's we'll talk about that a little bit later, but that was nice to hear a lot of different people. Okay, business. What did we do? Oh, there is, for those of you who maybe don't know, there's like a gigantic workbook. Luckily, it's a PDF right now, or it's a, you don't have to, they used to print it off. You can still print it off. 279 pages worth of material. And this you cannot see. I can hardly see it close up. But it lists, the workbook is full of a lot of different reports from different councils and
commissions and agencies.
Benefits. Yeah, I have another slide to kind of detail how many commissions the church actually has. So this says, there are many councils and commissions. Delegates hear reports from most of them, plus the president, plus the general secretary, and other. We heard a lot of mission reports. We heard benefits. There's a service where we remember those who have served in the RCA who have passed away. There's a lot of nice things. But again, you can't really see this either probably, but there are lots of councils, and then there are two groups that oversee pastor formation, and then there are all these commissions: Christian Action, Christian Discipleship and Education, Christian Unity. There's a church order, Commission on History, Judicial Business, Race and Ethnicity, Theology, Commission for Women. You as members of the Reformed Church, any of us could serve on those. You go through a nominating process. Dave's going to talk a little bit about the Commission on Christian Action because they had the most to report, I think, and the
most recommendations,
most
certainly.
things to vote on. And also and Cameron Van Coten Lawhead is
the moderator.
Moderator. So
he presented the report of the commission.
There you are. Yeah, their son.
So the Commission on Christian Action is tasked with considering, researching, making recommendations regarding how we as individuals, as congregations, as a denomination should kind of witness to and represent the reign of God, the kingdom of God, here in our society. It's, I think, very easy to be impulsive in that and to say, well, obviously this is what the church ought to be saying, this is what the church ought to be doing, but it really requires a bit of due diligence. You have to do your homework a little bit. You have to listen to a lot of different voices and make sure that you have your facts correct, so to speak. So that's one thing that the Christian Action Commission is supposed to kind of be the way in which the church thinks through those issues. Traditionally, the Christian Action Commission has brought a lot of recommendations to General Synod in the past. They tend to elicit lively discussion. Let's just put it that way. And I think often the reason for that is that Christian Action Commission is calling on the church to reflect on its own behavior, again, both as individuals and as bodies, as congregations, and as a denomination as a whole, and kind of saying it's not just what we say, it's what we do that matters. Sometimes what you do speaks so loud the world can't hear what you're saying, as the saying goes. This year, there were several recommendations that came from the Christian Action Commission. I want to focus on a couple of them. Some of them dealt with what the Christian Action Commission calls workers' rights, and they were particularly concerned with how the church, again at different levels, treats its employees. And one suggestion was that we really need to think through the issue of whether the church should be dealing with its employees, with some of its employees at any rate, as regular employees or as independent contractors. Sometimes the independent contractor route can be kind of a way for the congregations and other bodies within the church to avoid offering benefits to people who are essentially full-time employees. So again, the Christian Action Commission is saying this is something we ought to think about. And the recommendation was basically for the denomination to send a letter to congregations saying, think about this issue. Where that'll go, it's sometimes hard to say, as is the case with a lot of issues that are raised at General Synod. How they percolate down to the denominational or the individual level is often a bit murky. But at any rate, I don't know whether that letter has arrived yet. Mike hasn't seen it yet. Okay, well, maybe we need to find out what happened to that. Another issue involved kind of the same issue at the denominational level, but in a different respect. That because of the downsizing that the denomination has had to go through over the last couple of years, and for some other reasons as well, there have been some people dismissed from their positions, or their positions have been closed out. And in some cases, that has been accompanied by basically asking or requiring people to sign non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, with the denomination. And so the Christian Action Commission is kind of asking the question, is that a good look for us? Is that the way we want to be seen as treating employees or former employees of the denomination? What exactly is the meaning of a non-disclosure agreement? What don't we want disclosed? And so again, they're not necessarily making any accusations, but they're saying this is something we need to think about because it affects our witness. Okay? It affects the way we appear to the world when we use NDAs to kind of smooth over maybe some otherwise possibly awkward situations. Yeah. Another recommendation that they made,
one you want to talk
at the
about.
bottom here, involves a report that they made last year, I think, but they were kind of following up on it this year, on the issue of spiritual abuse. Spiritual abuse is kind of a new term, but it's not necessarily a new phenomenon. People talk about different forms of abuse that particularly can occur whenever one individual or group has a position of authority or dominance over others, or a kind of a special relationship with other people. So we talk about sexual abuse, child abuse, elder abuse, spousal abuse, and more recently people have been talking about spiritual abuse. Is there a special category of abuse that happens within religious bodies where there are hierarchies of authority? If so, how do we identify that, and what should we do to prevent it? What should we do to hold people accountable for it? And the recommendation, again, was not about any particular situation. It was more to just kind of raise people's consciousness about this issue and say this is something that happens sometimes in churches, and we need to be aware of it. We need to have some knowledge about it and the ability to monitor our own behavior and to hold each other accountable on that issue.
Yep, and they had a list of resources, and so that was real helpful too. Oh, they had other recommendations about the Holy Land, and that included a big thank you. A lot of you, or some of you might know Josh Viss or Sally Viss and the tours that they've done in the Holy Land and the informative trips and that kind of thing. So anyway, there was a thank you in one of those recommendations, and also kind of a call for us to be more educated on conflict there and also in other parts of the world. So real lively presentation. Cameron did a great job, so.
Yeah, I've been in that position of
Yeah.
being a moderator of a commission and giving a report that was contained controversial material, and I know you can feel kind of like you've been through the meat grinder at the end of that. Cameron did a good job.
Yeah, they're dealing more with the church and contemporary issues in society. So, okay, one big thing that Synod had to address, or was working on addressing, was the restructuring of the RCA. How is that going to happen? Our General Secretary, again, and there's a restructuring team, which has, looked like it had maybe 10, 15 people on it or so, and they came up with a draft of a plan. And you might wonder, you might be saying, why do we need to restructure? And so, I guess I need to talk about what Eddie said first. In his report to the General Synod, the General Secretary said in June of 2022, 68 churches had left the RCA, and within 1 year, by this past June, 222 churches had left. Out of this is what I don't know. Do you know how many churches were in the RCA? Yeah, so that's significant when you think about all those commissions and all the things that the church was doing, all the people involved. And so they needed to restructure, or they need to restructure to rethink partly finances, but also how do we kind of move forward. I actually thought it was there were less churches, so now there are, yes, but I thought there were more than 200. More than 300, but still, that's significant. So, the secretary talked about why that had happened. I thought this was kind of interesting. He said many of those who left, they had three characteristics in common. They thought they were paying too much in assessments. The church, we pay a certain amount of money to the RCA to be part of the denomination. It used to be per member. It became like a percentage of offering and
Income. Yeah.
of income. That's right. You didn't say offering, income. The General Secretary disagreed they were paying too much, but based on the amount of the times I've been to classes and discussions, I think that this was probably a uniting factor among all churches, that they thought they paid too much. Differences on human sexuality, that has been a large conversation, that he thought that was why people had left. And then this one was the surprising one, that to me, there's the disagreement on women's role in ministry. There were still, or he said one common feature of many of the churches that have left is that they feel sort of, they're not sure, they haven't really fully embraced women's role in ministry, even though this has been like 50 years ago, right, that they passed ordination. So those three things he felt have been common in the driving, in people leaving. So the RCA is a much smaller denomination now, hence the need for restructuring. And then this says, that just to let you know, the General Secretary is hopeful. He's not a doom and gloom messenger guy. His focus is, he believes we should focus on the gospel, on spreading the good news, and on following Jesus with humility. And he felt like if we can come around those things. That was his thinking. But the way we do it, and if that is all the, I have to say this in the right way, but those are good things. But there are other things that make a denomination work too. So, but that's where he really is very, sees a lot of promise in focusing on mission. So the current structure of the RCA, in case you're wondering, is you have to picture this as kind of like a pyramid. I don't have a nice diagram for you. And Dave can correct, or maybe Dave can explain this better. General Synod is the great...
General Synod is the broadest assembly of the Reformed Church in America. Sometimes people use the term highest. I think that is not always appropriate. It's the broadest in terms of its geographical scope, and its purpose is to deal with issues that need to be dealt with, for the denomination as a whole. General Synod has not been understood in our tradition as having the power to insert itself at lower levels or more specific levels. So General Synod can't come in and tell you how to run your congregation, so to speak. That's best done at the local level. But issues that need to be dealt with at that broad denominational level are within the purview of General Synod. Well, yeah, in a sense it represents the whole denomination.
Yeah.
But on issues that need to be dealt with at that level.
Pyramid is a wrong image, so get the pyramid out of your head, because really the General Synod is it's not the tippy top or point up there. There is a General Synod Council that is led by the General Secretary. It seeks to be very diverse, and it's maybe 20 people, maybe less. I'm not sure, but
yeah, at least 20 people, I would say. Yeah, it's kind of an executive council for General Synod. That's, I think, how it was originally conceived. It kind of takes care of the business of the denomination in between General Synods. Doesn't really have the authority to make policy decisions. Those come from General Synod, but it has the task of seeing to it that those are implemented by the General Secretary and by the staff of the denomination.
Yeah.
The General Synod Council isn't staff. Right.
All over the country. And they seek to have a balance of men and women and ethnic, racial, and you can apply for that, or someone might tap you for that. And then the other parts, the regional synod, a diagram would be so much nicer, I guess. Well, let me put the rest of them up there. There's the regional synod, there's the classis, and then there is the consistories and the congregation at the local level. So the classis we were part of Classis Central Iowa. It used to include, I think, about 30 churches. I might be wrong about that, but mostly from the region, although we at one point had a church in another state. The Classis helps to govern the local churches, overseeing seminary students, ordinations, installations, questions of discipline, and that sort of thing. So there will be Classis representatives here on September 10th when we have our installation for Mike and Elizabeth, which is nice. I have less of a sense of what the regional synod does. I feel like it's program, and even our pastor does. So it's another layer of the governance and government. I think the Classis has more, oversight of what's going on in churches, and who's a pastor and that how people get along. Regional Synod doesn't do government stuff.
Yeah, Regional Synod, in some ways within our polity, Classis is pretty well understood what they're all about, what they do. General Synod is pretty well understood. Regional Synod depends, right? It's floating in between those two levels, and maybe picking up tasks along the way that weren't being well attended to either at the classical level or at the General Synod level. So it has evolved, and it functions differently, I think, in different parts of the denomination. Functions better in some parts of the denomination than others. So there's a lot of fuzziness about the role of the regional synod. But on the other hand, I think it has played a very important role at some times and in some places.
David and Laura, you mentioned earlier that finances was one of the big issues
Well, they won't be contributing, you know, they won't be paying what they call an assessment to the larger denomination anymore. And a number of those churches are quite big, and so, not all of them. But. Oh, well, is that General Synod? I mean, they vote on it at General Synod.
Yeah, General Synod is ultimately responsible for making the decisions. The process by which that decision is made is similar to the process by which budget decisions are made by anybody. In other words, it's messy, it takes place in the dark a lot. It needs a lot of, you know, accountants and number crunchers, but, you know. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
yeah. Well, that's one of the big things that happens at, you know, at a general synod is that, you know, the assessment amount is approved. What's that?
Well, there was only one measure that came forward that said, can we increase the assessment by, like, it's a small amount. It's always a small amount, you know, so it's kind of incrementally goes up until we're at a big amount. But there was only one thing that we voted on this year that would have increased the assessment. And it passed. So I don't know it's for a good ministry, right? But it all costs money. So we don't actually vote on a specific amount. It just, Mike probably knows more about, like, eventually they tell you how much it is
Yeah, there's 3 levels to the assessment. There's a general synod that's part of the assessment, but then there's a regional synod assessment, and there's a classes assessment, right? And
Yeah.
each body votes on those, and they send that to the church and say, here's what you vote for. So this is the general synod assessment, and yes, that's determined by folks in the controller's office that do that for the denomination based on where we're at with our current structure.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Maybe this isn't fair, but from what I've heard and kind of seen, it seems that a lot of these churches that have left don't want to pay the assessment, but they still want the benefits. They still want to go in with missions, or they still want to go in with other things and still be part of some of the things in the RCA. Have you seen that?
I know they don't want to pay the assessment. I don't know where the world of mission is. I mean, I do see people that want to cooperate on those things, but I don't know how it actually plays out on the ground. Like, I don't know if they're going to still be a partner in mission, which is what we have done in the past. I don't really know. Oh, uh-huh.
And they were told now, well, no, you can't. You're not RCA anymore. They were quite upset about that.
Yeah, well, yeah.
You know, pay the dues, you know, play the game.
Yeah. Darlene, do you have a question? Oh, okay.
The mission thing came up at General Synod a year ago. I thought that the churches that were leaving, they would continue to get into the mission.
I would think it would be a possibility, but
So Global Mission receives no assessment dollars. Global Mission, RCA Global Mission is funded
that's separate.
entirely by donations, partners in mission shares, those kinds of things. So actually what's interesting is RCA Global Mission, which is part of our denomination, actually attended the gathering for the Alliance of Reformed Churches because there are several Alliance of Reformed Churches that want to continue to support their RCA missionaries. So yes, RCA Global Mission, it is a denominational ministry. It's owned by the RCA, but because of the way they are funded, they also frequent other gatherings where they can solicit fundraising for their missionaries.
And the Alliance is another group where some of these churches that have left have gone. And so, yeah, that makes sense.
And presumably, something, you know, a body like the Alliance of Reformed Churches, they may not have call it assessments, but if they are going to have staff and if they are going to provide services of some sort to the member congregations, they're going to have some equivalent,
Right.
right? Because people don't work for free, and
Yeah.
services
So that
cost money.
website- Barb is asking, do we know how many of the 200 congregations are in the Alliance? I don't know.
I don't know how they're split up. People went in all, or congregations went in all kinds of different directions. The Alliance of Reformed Churches may be the largest single
the largest.
group, but
Yeah.
they're certainly not the only group. And there are some established denominations like the Presbyterian Church in America that also,
Some people went
some
there.
affiliated with them. So
Yeah. I think that was an addition. Well, I actually don't. That's a good question. I don't know.
Was any other classes besides Central Iowa hit as hard?
Yeah, some harder. Yeah.
I don't think there's a reform on RCA Church in South Dakota.
No, I heard in South Dakota, no. Right, they've gone Alliance of Reformed Churches. Yeah, and very many have got, like the guy from California said, I used to have 40 RCA churches in my classes, and we're down to 7. And so that's partly the worms were coming from there. Well, Katie has it. 159 have gone to the Alliance. Yeah, there are various other little smaller networks, but with some bigger churches. So yeah. Well, we wanted to show you what the draft plan was. This is a draft, but this is what. So they do have a diagram for this. I couldn't diagram what we have now, and this is what Mike handed out some copies to you. This was the proposal for what the restructure might look like, and I have a better picture. That was much better than my other one, but then Mike added the arrows, which I didn't know how to do this. Yeah. So to me, it looks like a bunch of molecules. Unattached.
organic chemistry lecture.
Unattached molecules going around a center, but the center hadn't been labeled, and so Dave found a printout that had some comparisons between what some of these circles might indicate. So the middle could maybe potentially, or maybe currently that's General Synod, but then it would be proposed to be a Global Leadership Council, a new name, and then the center of each of these floaters here is called the Resource Center, which might be comparable to a regional synod in some ways. It kind of oversees a region of churches, and these little green ones are being called clusters, and potentially they might be kind of like what the classes had been. But as you see from some of those other pages in that document, it like tells you, what a classes does now and what the cluster would do. They're actually quite
different.
Yeah. Because a classes, really does oversee judicial matters, ordinations. It's a permanent body. We are together forever, as long as we last. It's self-governing, but a cluster is more like a network, and could be temporary. Ordination stuff is overseen by the Resource Center, so the Resource Center kind of handles that stuff, approving people, coming to the services and that sort of thing. And it could be like people just coming together over an affinity on a certain issue, where we all agree on something, or we all want to pursue a certain mission together. And so at one point we're with a few other churches that are on the same page as we are, and then we want to do another project, and we go with another cluster, And so it's very impermanent.
It is not necessarily
Not
geographical.
necessarily.
It is
Right.
not bound to geography, although it would make sense, I think, in a lot of cases for people
still
to
be.
have a cluster with churches that were relatively near them, but that's not required.
That's
Yeah. In RCA polity terms, clusters are not assemblies. An assembly has the power to determine policy on relevant issues. It can act as a judicatory, that is to say, it can kind of resolve disputes. It has authority. Clusters don't have authority in that sense.
right.
So.
Yeah. Well, this is, yeah.
There was a lot of diversity in reaction, let's say. I think there were people who felt that what was being proposed does not necessarily carry forward some of the elements that kind of make us who we are. And you know, the core of our polity. And there were other people who basically said, we want the flexibility that this offers us, and you know, it's something new. That's clearly the case, and you know, you shouldn't be afraid of things just because they're new, as we heard in the sermon this morning.
Yeah, we got together in small groups and talked about it, and they took all the comments. We also had, Norman is not here, Norman Kohlenbrander, but we had an open mic night added where people could, had an hour to air their opinions and their...
which wasn't on the original schedule of Synod,
it was
but I think there was a very strong push to say these small group discussions are fine, and all of the other kind of controlled environments for discussing it are fine, but we need to have a setting where, you know, we can just, we, Synod as a whole, can have an open and freewheeling discussion of it. As one delegate said in kind of arguing for that and saying, you know, this is what we need to do, he said, just let Synod be Synod. You know,
so let everybody talk.
Don't always try to funnel our discussion into, you know, kind of packages where you can control the outcome. There's got to be a time where people can just say what they think on this issue, and we had that, I think.
Do major issues like this take like 2 or 3 years?
Yes.
I mean, this is an issue where I think the schedule that has been proposed for making the decision is beginning to look to a lot of people like it's way too fast. That, you know, this is the sort of thing that's going to need a lot of discussion and back and forth, revision, if there's any hope that it's going to be passed at the end. You know, essentially, what you'll be asking a general synod to do, and right now, it's kind of scheduled to come up for a final vote at next year's synod. So you'll be asking that synod to basically say, you folks having fun? You like what you're doing here? Vote yourself out of existence. You know? They could say no.
They could say no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, you know, this is the sort of thing you don't necessarily want to bring it up if you can see that it's headed for defeat. So that would argue for more time, more participation, more refining of the plan, so that people are going to feel like it's something they've had a say in and can hopefully vote for.
Could you give maybe a little better description of, you know, we had a good description of what the General Synod and then the Executive Committee, so to speak,
Right.
within that. The Global Leadership Council, how does that work?
That is where I wanted to go next.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah. The plan for that, so most of what today I think we look at as the issues we vote on and and ordaining and doctrinal things like that, I think that's going to happen at the Resource Center in this model.
Which hopefully will be renamed, because Resource Center is a terrible name
Sounds
for
like
adjudicatory for an assembly.
But the Global Leadership Council, at least the way they portrayed it, it would host a gathering of the church every 3 to 4 years, and their job, or it would be like a.
It would not be an assembly.
It would not be an assembly. It would be more a time for learning, for worship, for equipping, I think is a word, equipping us to go out, and, inspiring us in our mission efforts and, that kind of thing. So it would become a kind of a big major conference at a big center, and can I share my opinion of what I think it would be?
Sure. Tell us what you really think.
Well, I feel like, I think that what they're planning is good, but I feel like it'll be kind of like going to camp and, getting inspired every 4 years, getting revived every 4 years, going to, I felt like it's going to be a big conference. And the goal, it's not dealing with any matters of how does the Reformed Church think about this certain creed or this action going on or whatever. It's going to be all get on fire for God.
But presumably those kinds of denominational level decisions are going to be made by the Global Leadership Council. And then it becomes important, what kind of body is that? And the closest analogy to the Global Leadership Council within the present polity of the RCA is the General Synod Council. So essentially, the Executive Committee is becoming the General Synod. Okay, that much smaller group of people is going to be making the kinds of decisions that formerly were given to the General Synod, with its representation, from the congregational level on through classes and on up, and it's not really clear whether that would mean that basically you would have this body that doesn't have a clear relationship connection down to the grassroots of the denomination, making decisions for the denomination. Some people aren't comfortable with that. Other people see it as very efficient, much cheaper than getting people together at the hundreds of people that you need to get together at a General Synod to make that work. So in that sense, it might have some advantages, but whether it would have the kind of legitimacy that a General Synod could have as a representative body is one of the questions that I think needs to be hashed out. Pat?
How are these members of the General Synod Council or the new Leadership Council, how do they get their
That's another good question. That was not specified in the draft plan. They hadn't gotten that far yet. But I think for a lot of people wanted to say that's precisely the question that needs to be answered before we know whether we want to go in this direction or not.
Yeah, it is helpful to remember it is a draft, but so people raised that question in small groups and on the floor, and if you are concerned that the question didn't get asked the way you want it to, you can actually write an email, and I was going to show, just because we're getting a little short, but there is ongoing discussion of the restructure plan, open to anyone. There is going to be a group that, or anybody can come, a meeting at the bridge, and I actually did call, or I texted Suzanne Vogel, who's the pastor there, one of the pastors there this morning, and she said, we don't know yet when it's going to be held. So I don't have a date for you, but if you're curious or you want to go and find out, raise comments,
And
that's
that will
fine.
be a meeting that will have members of the planning group
The planning group
there
will be there.
to
Yeah,
explain what they have in mind, but also to hear feedback on the plan.
yeah,
Is this planning group a separate group from the executive committee?
yes.
Yeah,
Separate group altogether?
yeah.
And it's fairly representative, and I don't know, but still, it's a
If you've ever been on a planning group or a task force, you know that sometimes it acquires an ethos of its own, so to speak, in a sense that wants to go in a particular direction. But then I've had the experience of proudly presenting the results of our task force to the larger body, and they say, "What in the world were you thinking?"
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean it's a bad plan, right? Or a bad direction to go. It just means that it's something that has to be tested in a broader assembly, so to speak, before we rush off in that direction.
The bridge is, it used to be Meredith Drive Reformed Church, and then they had a satellite campus called The Bridge, and now they've sold their Meredith Drive property, and they all worship at the Bridge, and it's in Johnston. So
It's in
a
Johnston,
church.
Iowa.
It's
Yeah.
a church, yeah.
Pardon?
Oh, the 4 churches. Second Reformed, Prairie City, where Jason Taylor is, and who was youth pastor here for a while, and the Bridge in Johnston, and then Ames counts in that 4, but they are still kind of working on being officially organized as an RCA.
They're in the
congregation.
process of
They're
becoming
in the
organized, yeah.
process. So those 4, yeah.
Over 20,
Over
certainly.
20. Yeah. People have gone with the Alliance Reformed Church or with the Sending Network. That's a group that Third and First and Waukee, there was a number that went with them, but they're not close to the 159. That's not meant to be a big group, so yeah. This I have the email up here. You may not all be able to see that, but it's restructuringteam@rca.org, all one word. Or if you like to browse, you can go to rca.org on your website, and then they have a tab for restructuring team, and you can find out more. Right now, it just kind of explains where we've been, and it doesn't say where meetings are being held and things like that. But yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we can make that available.
I know we're probably at time. Well, we have been talking about questions. You can ask more questions. Yes, I just wanted to, before we leave, so Synod ends, and we have our outgoing president, our incoming president, who is Judy Nelson, who was a chaplain from Michigan, and she served as vice president all this year, and now she'll be president. And the new guy that we elected is the new vice president is a pastor.
Joshua Scheid.
Yeah, pastor from New York, Massapequa Reformed Church, and I thought it might be close to where Eric and Ellen are. He had something about Long Island on his thing, but I'm not sure. I can play some Dutch bingo with Joshua Scheid, but I won't do that today. And then we all went home and saw our people and our pets, and I thought I'll end with the dog. But does anybody have any other questions? Mary?
Yeah.
Heartland.
They're still in the denomination, but they have changed their
They formed
changed
their
their
own
classes, right?
They are modeling a cluster for us in some ways. They're gonna, is it East Sioux or West Sioux or East Sioux classes? Yeah, they didn't want to be in classes Central Iowa. They did not want to stay in classes Central Iowa, so they're going with East Sioux. So, that was their choice. So,
Okay, well, thank you for your attention, and yeah.
I hope that's helpful. Okay. All right, and we don't, next year will be exciting. Next year the Synod is meeting in Arizona. I don't know. I have a hard time believing they're going to make a decision on this, but we'll find out. And overall, I felt like it was a very nice synod, congenial synod, except there were a few times, where
A few bumps
people
in the
were
road,
ruled
but
out
yeah,
of order.
that's what makes it fun, too.
Yeah.
Hey, but I sort of meant by my question earlier was, is there something in your Constitution that would put the brakes on, a reading this year, a second reading that year?
It has to pass 2 synods?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the mechanics are, but the RCA does have a constitution, and it's pretty specific about matters of process. That's something that we kind of pride ourselves on. But yeah, when what you're doing is going to upend the Constitution, then the question is, how can you constitutionally rewrite the whole Constitution? And
What that means is, though, it could take a while yet
Yeah.
before a change happens.
I'm sure the Church Order Commission is going to be on that. So, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.